All right, we're going to look at some problems today from section 7.5 in our textbook, solving rational equations. And in essence, we're going to do some things similar to what you did back in your middle school days when you had fractions in your equations, and that we're going to find a common denominator and we're going to bust our fractions so that we no longer have those. Okay, so here I look and I have m3 and 3m, so my common denominator, least common denominator, would be 3m. So I am going to multiply every term by 3m over 1, and you'll see that each fraction gets eliminated. So when I distribute that here, I have an m and an m, so that divides out. So I'm just left with 5 times 3, or 15. Here, when I distribute the 3m, the 3's divide out, and I'm left with 1 times m, or m. And when I distribute here, the 3m's divide out, and I'm left with 1. So there I am with an equation with no more fractions. Subtract 15 from both sides, and we get m is negative 14. I do want to make sure that's not an extraneous solution, so I do check back in, and I see it does not make the denominator 0, which is really what we're concerned about. Okay, here our least common denominator, r squared, 3r squared, and r squared would be 3r squared. So again, we're going to multiply everything by that. When we distribute, the r squareds divide out, and we're left with 3 times r plus 4. Here, the 3r squareds divide out. We're left with r plus 6. Here, the r squareds divide out, and we're left with 3 times 4r plus 20. Okay, so now no more fractions. We'll distribute 3r plus 12. There's r plus 6, 12r plus 60. I'm going to see 3r plus 1r is 4r. When I subtract 4r from both sides, 12 plus 6 is 18. And I'll subtract 60. So we get negative 42 equals 8r. Divide by 8. R equals negative. That simplifies to negative 21 over 4. And I look back and I see that that does not make any of our denominators 0. So if 0 happened to be one of our answers, or our only answer, that would be extraneous, and we'd potentially have no solution there. Okay, here, in order to be able to figure out our common denominator, I'm going to need to factor this. So we've seen this before where this ends up being one of our factors. Our other one is m minus 5. So our least common denominator, m minus 1, m minus 5. So that's what I'm going to multiply by. When I distribute, the m minus 1's will divide out. And we're left with m plus 4 times m minus 5. Now here, these two multiply to this, so that all divides out, and I'm left with minus 7 equals. Now notice on the right side, there is no denominator, or is only 1. So I end up with that, which is m squared minus 6m plus 5. All right, so we're going to distribute here to use our FOIL. So m squared, we end up with minus, whoops, let me get an eraser there. We end up with minus m, right, because a minus 5m and a plus 4m. Minus 20 minus 7 equals m squared minus 6m plus 5. I subtract m squared from both sides. They would divide out. That's negative 27, which I'll add to both sides. Add the 6m. And we end up with 5m equals, that should have been a 27, 32. So m is 32 over 5. And again, I look and I see that that does not make our denominator 0. All right, last one. So again, we're going to factor. So first, I'll factor out a 4, right? I can factor out 4 from each term, and we're left with minus 8b plus 15. And here we're going to factor out a 4. We're left with b minus 3. And so here, this factors to b minus 5, b minus 3. And then I have the 2. So there's our denominators. So the least common denominator will be 4, b minus 5, b minus 3. So that's what we're going to multiply everything by. So again, we distribute. Now all of this multiplied out is all of that. So those would divide out. We're just left with 3. Here when I distribute, I've got the 4, the b minus 3, so I'm left with a b minus 5 times 1. Now here, when I distribute, 2 divides into 4 twice, so I'm left with 2, and then this, which is what we have here, b squared minus 8b plus 15. All right, so let's see what that leaves us with. So we have b minus 5 plus 2b squared minus 16b plus 30. I have a quadratic. I want to set that equal to 0, so I'm going to subtract 3. So notice I have minus 5 minus 3, which is minus 8, plus 22, which would be, or plus 30 rather, which leaves us with plus 22. I have a 2b squared, and b minus 16b is minus 15b. All right, so now we have to factor. I'll do that over. Let me get another piece of paper here. All right, so let me show you how we would factor that. Right, so 2b squared minus 15b plus 22. So I'm going to split the middle, two numbers that add up to negative 15, and multiply the product of 2 and 22, which is 44. So I'm looking at factors of 44, 1 and 44, 2 and 22, 4 and 11, and I see, oh, 4 and 11. So negative 4, negative 11, negative 4, negative 11, multiply to positive 44, add up to negative 15, split our middle, so 2b squared minus 4b minus 11b plus 22. I'm going to factor a negative 11 out of these two terms, changes that sign to b minus 2. Factor out a 2b, we're left with b minus 2. Factor out the b minus 2's, and we're left with 2b minus 11. All right, so we're going to transfer that back over here. And so we have 2b minus 11 and b minus 2. Use our zero product property, set each factor equal to 0. And we get 2 and 11 halves. And I look back in each of our factors, and if I substitute 11 halves or 2 back in, none of the denominators are 0. So we're all good. All right, I hope that helps, and we'll see you soon.